You're alone in the dark. Not a flicker remains. At 12:07 a.m., every light in your house dies at once, plunging you into a silence so complete you can hear the rush of your own blood. This is the story of the man who invited the darkness in, and the ancient key he was tricked into forging. To understand that final, absolute blackout, we must rewind to a water-stained letter from October 1, 1923, and the impeccably dressed visitor who arrived with the storm. The rain is loud against my window tonight. A good night for this. I have a letter here dated October 1923. The paper is water-stained, but not from this rain. It was sent from a professor of archaeology at Miskatonic University to a colleague in Boston, and it describes a visitor. The professor writes of a thunderstorm over Arkham, the kind that turns the streets to black mirrors. A knock at his office door long after hours. The man who entered, he says, was impeccably dressed, with a voice like polished stone. He gave his name, but the ink is blurred here, perhaps intentionally. He had come, he said, to discuss the professor's recent monograph on pre-human civilizations in the Sahara, a niche subject. The sort of thing only a handful of men in the world would even know about. But this visitor knew. He quoted passages from memory. He corrected a translation error on page 47, a mistake the professor had privately suspected but never admitted. He spoke of the professor's unpublished theories, the ones locked in his desk drawer. That feeling when someone knows a secret about you that you've never told anyone, the chill that starts at the base of your spine. The professor felt it then. He writes that the conversation lasted an hour. The visitor was charming, brilliant, persuasive, but there was a moment just as lightning flashed outside. The professor glanced at the wall. The visitor's shadow, cast by the desk lamp, did not rise from the floor where the man stood. It pooled in the corner of the room, thick and liquid, and it seemed to be looking back at him. When the light steadied, it was just a shadow again. A trick of the storm, he told himself. He almost believed it. The visitor left as abruptly as he arrived, leaving behind only the scent of ozone and a single, unsettling suggestion that the professor's work was not merely academic, that it was a key, and that he should continue. The letter ends there. The professor's handwriting, usually so precise, becomes a frantic scrawl in the final paragraph. My own hand is steady as I hold this paper, but I feel a tremor wanting to start, because this is only the first page. What he did after taking that suggestion that requires a second document, let me find it for you. The second document is a journal, leather-bound, the pages thick and yellowed. The entry is dated November 7th, 1923, midnight. He writes of being back in his private study at home, the storm long past, but the smell of ozone still hanging in the air, sharp and metallic. He couldn't sleep. He was trying to write, to make sense of the visitor's suggestions, but his thoughts were scattered. All the electrical lights in the house were on, he notes, as if to push back the memory of that disobedient shadow. Then, at precisely 12:07 a.m., every single one of them went out. Not a flicker. A total, instantaneous failure. He describes the darkness as absolute, and the silence that followed, the specific silence that follows when a power outage kills all the electronics in your house and you're left alone with just the sound of your own breathing. He fumbled for a match, lit the kerosene lamp on his desk. The pool of light felt terribly small, and in that new, quiet dark, he heard a voice, not from the door, from the corner of the room near the bookshelf where his shadow had pooled. It was the visitor's voice, polished stone. It spoke a single sentence: "The Van der Graaf generator in your laboratory will cease functioning in 3, 2, 1. A crash echoed from downstairs from the direction of his home laboratory. Glass shattering, a heavy thud. The professor froze, the match burning down to his fingers. He didn't feel the burn. He writes, "I know the sound of that machine failing. It is not a sound that occurs by chance." He rushed downstairs. The laboratory was a mess of glass and twisted wire. The main generator, a complex and temperamental device, had not merely stopped. It had exploded from within, as if its own internal charge had reversed in an instant. The visitor's prediction had been exact to the second. When the professor returned to his study, the visitor was there, sitting in the professor's own chair, smiling. Not a friendly smile, the smile of a clinician who has confirmed a hypothesis. He was waiting for me to see it. The journal entry reads, "He wanted to witness the understanding dawn, the understanding that he was not a man, and this was not a conversation, it was a demonstration." The professor demanded to know how the visitor stood, ignoring the question, and walked to the study window. He looked out into the black garden. "Your work is the key," he repeated, his breath fogging the glass. "But a key turns both ways. You have been looking out, now something will look in." He left then, through the door that was still closed. The professor doesn't explain how, the sentence simply ends. And a new sound began. Scratching at the study window. Not the erratic tap of a branch in the wind, a slow, deliberate drag, like a single fingernail being drawn down the pane, top to bottom, then again and again. Something outside, learning the shape of the glass, learning the weakness of the latch. The professor's handwriting disintegrates. The final sentence of the entry is a jagged, ink-blotted scrawl that runs right off the page. It is not trying to get in. It is telling me it is already. The page after that is blank. The journal ends there. But the story doesn't. The third document is a police report. Arkham, 1925. Dawn at a dockside warehouse. 3 men, longshoremen, found by the morning shift. They weren't injured. They were sitting in a perfect triangle in the center of the empty floor, staring at nothing. Catatonic. The officer on scene noted the smell, not the fish and salt of the harbor, but something dry and ancient, like open tombs and hot sand. And in the center of their triangle, a single item, a walking cane of polished, dark wood topped with a silver scarab. The men were taken to Arkham Sanitarium under sedation. They each told the same story in the same flat, ruined tone. An Egyptian gentleman had approached them the night before. He had elegant manners, spoke perfect English, and promised to show them a truth about the world their minds were too small to see. He led them into the warehouse, and he showed them. The report is clinical. It does not speculate on what "showed them" means. It only records the result. Their minds, as the attending physician wrote, had come unraveled, like a spool of thread snipped and dropped. And they kept repeating the same phrase, a specific, chilling phrase, that the blackness between the stars wasn't empty, that it had a voice, and it was singing to them. You know that feeling, don't you? That moment in a crowded room when you recognize someone from across the way, a friend, an acquaintance. But when you look closer, their face doesn't quite match your memory. The eyes are a shade too far apart. The smile uses muscles a human smile shouldn't. It's a subtle wrongness that makes you doubt your own mind before you doubt the world. That is the feeling that permeates this report. The Egyptian gentleman was recognized by all 3 men, individually, as someone they each thought they knew. A cousin from out of town, an old ship's captain, a debt collector. His face was a borrowed mask, worn just poorly enough to be seen. The report concludes with a single, dry footnote from the chief of police, a recommendation to file the case and cease active investigation. The final line reads, "Per consultation with Miskatonic authorities, this incident bears marked similarity to previous unresolved cases. The pattern is acknowledged." This wasn't the first time. It was simply the first time he left witnesses. But patterns, once you see them, are hard to unsee. They leave a kind of stain on your perception. After reading that report, I began looking for him in other places, not in police files, but in the landscape itself, in the places the stories say he prefers. I spent an evening much like this one, not with paper, but with a satellite map. zooming in on a specific arid stretch of the Egyptian desert, just as the digital twilight rendered everything in shades of deep blue and burnt umber. From that height you see the geometry, the perfect impossible lines that predate the pharaohs. Archaeologists have catalogued the major sites, of course, but there are ruins that don't appear in any official record. Structures whose foundations are aligned not to the North Star as it is now, but to stars that vanished from our sky tens of thousands of years ago. It's like looking at old family photos and noticing a stranger in the background who doesn't belong. Someone no one remembers inviting, but there they are, smiling at the camera. The desert has strangers in its background, alignments that speak to a different sky, a different earth. And I went to one, not that one in Egypt, a smaller place referenced in a dismissed surveyor's note from 1911. A cluster of stones on a high, wind-scoured plateau in a country I won't name. I went at dusk, like a fool. The travel was difficult, the last mile on foot. The stones were there, just as the note described, black basalt, worn smooth not by sand, but by something else. They formed no pattern I could decipher from the ground. The silence there was the worst part. It wasn't an empty silence. It was a thick, attentive silence. The kind that hangs in a room after a terrible argument when everyone has left, but the anger hasn't. I stood in the center of those stones as the light failed, and I felt it, a specific crawling sensation between my shoulder blades, not being watched by an animal, not even being watched by a person. It was the feeling of being remembered. As if the air itself had tasted human fear before, had developed a preference for its texture and was recognizing the flavor in me. I left before full dark. I did not run, but I have never walked faster in my life. He doesn't just wear the faces of people we know, he wears the face of the world. A cliff that looks almost like a profile, a canyon that feels like a waiting throat, arrangement of ancient stones that whispers, just on the edge of hearing. I was here before you, I will be here after. And sometimes, if you are unlucky, you walk into one of those places and you realize the mask has turned, just slightly, and is looking back at you. But the places he haunts are only half the story. The other half is the people he finds there. The ones who are already cracked. Not broken, not yet. Just fractured enough for something to get in. I found a transcript, dated 1931, from the Arkham Sanitarium. A patient interview, conducted at 3 a.m. in a padded room. The doctor's notes describe the man as agitated but coherent, his speech a frantic whisper against the sound of rain on the high barred window. He wasn't raving about tentacles or giant monsters. He was talking about a visitor. He said the man came during a low point, a bankruptcy, a betrayal, the kind of personal collapse that makes the world feel thin and false. The visitor was kind, helpful. He offered insights, connections, solutions that seemed to work for a time. But every solution came with a hidden price. A new door opened onto a darker room. The patient described it not as an attack, but as an amplification, a turning up of the volume on a song that was already playing. He doesn't invent the suffering, the patient whispered, his words typed out verbatim on the transcript. He finds it. He finds the flaw in the vase, the weak spot in the bridge, the secret shame in the heart, and then he applies the gentlest, most precise pressure, just enough to show you how completely it can all come apart. You know that feeling, not the grand tragedy, but the small, specific cruelty of timing. When you're having the worst day of your life, your car won't start, the rain has soaked through your coat, you've just received news you can't process, and a stranger on the street chooses that exact moment to give you a genuinely kind, unassuming smile. The sheer discomfort of being truly seen at your most vulnerable. That's his signature. That's the crawling chaos. Not the storm, but the perfect, calm eye at its center that watches you drown. The transcript goes on for pages. This whispered, escalating confession. And then, near the end, a shift. The patient's voice, according to the doctor's note, changed. The agitation fell away, replaced by a chilling, lucid calm. The whispering stopped. In a clear, quiet voice, the patient said, "The terrifying part isn't the monster under the bed. Every child fears that. The terrifying part is the monster who, one night, pulls up a chair beside the bed, who sits there in the dark, not to grab you, but to watch you. To watch the exact moment you open your eyes, see the shape in the corner and understand. The monster has been there for a long, long time, and he is not here for the quick scare. He is here for the long game." That idea, the patient's final lucid terror, it stayed with me. It explains the next document, declassified in 2004, stamped Project Looking Glass, dated November 1947. It's a military after-action report from a remote listening post in New Mexico, not about UFOs, about a man. He arrived at the gate at dawn during a sandstorm. No vehicle, just there, civilian clothes impeccable. He presented credentials identifying him as a psychological warfare consultant. They let him in for 3 days, he observed. He spoke to personnel, and then he provided the commanding officer with a list, 3 specific dates and times over the following week. He said, "At these precise moments, your most critical piece of listening equipment will fail, not a mechanical fault, a perceptual one. It will hear something it was not designed to hear, and it will break." The report is dry, technical. It confirms each failure happened exactly as predicted. The equipment didn't malfunction. It overloaded, recording something that, when played back, induced migraines and transient amnesia in the technicians. After the 3rd failure, the consultant was gone. No departure logged. In his quarters, they found a single sheet of paper on the pillow. No signature. It read, "The primary pleasure is not in setting the anthill ablaze. It is in watching the ants, for days beforehand, as they scurry past the first wisp of smoke. Failing to understand their world is already ending." It's the cruelty of the prediction. The proof that he not only sees the flaw but knows the exact second it will give way. It's like checking your phone's location history and finding a place you don't remember visiting, a blank spot in your memory where something else might have been. He creates those blanks in reality. Most accounts stop there. A visitation, a display, a vanishing. But there's one more page. A letter written by a linguist stationed at that base, sent to his sister a month later. He claims he spoke to the consultant directly, the night before he left. He's the only one who asked the obvious, terrifying question. The linguist's name was Dr. Eleanor Vance. She didn't send the letter. She kept it, folded inside a book of poetry, until 1958. That's when she checked into a hotel room off Times Square, and she wrote something else. The note was found next to her. Dawn light through dirty windows, the smell of old paper and cheap perfume still hanging in the air. She wrote about the night she spoke to him. She asked him why. Why show us the cracks in our own world? What do you get from it? He answered by teaching her a language. Not a human one. A tongue of angles and pressure, she wrote. It had words for colors that don't exist, shades you see only in the moment before a migraine, or in the deep ocean where light gives up. It had grammar for emotions we haven't named, the specific despair of understanding a joke too late, the quiet horror of a familiar room seen from a wrong angle. He showed her. She wrote that our reality is just a dialect, a crude, shouting tongue compared to the silent, perfect speech of the void, and he is the translator. That's the cruelty. He makes you fluent in your own insignificance. It's the ultimate violation of privacy. Like the moment after you send a text you immediately regret, watching those 3 dots appear and disappear, knowing something is being formulated on the other end, something you can't take back. He is those 3 dots for the universe. Her final line is written in a steady, calm hand. It says she has learned his language, and now she is going to teach him something in return, a human word. The only one left that might mean anything to something that knows everything else. She is going to teach him what human silence sounds like when it is finally, completely, and voluntarily complete. The hotel maid found her at noon. The room was otherwise empty. The poetry book was gone. I close the folder. The last page of the last document settles back into place. In my room, there is only the single lamp on the desk, this small, warm pool of light I'm sitting in, and the deep, patient shadows that fill the rest of the space. Nyarlathotep isn't under your bed. He isn't in your closet. He's the reason you check, lying awake at 3 a.m., hearing your house settle and wondering for the first time why we call it settling, as if houses are creatures that eventually grow still. That quiet, specific dread is his signature. The professor's visitor, the asylum patient's whisper, the linguist's final, terrible lesson, they're all facets of the same truth. He is the crawling chaos, which means he is the pattern in the static. The coincidence that is too perfect. The thought that arrives in the dark and feels like it came from somewhere else. We tell stories about monsters that want to eat us, or gods that want to worship. Those are simple, clean. Nyarlathotep is the third thing. The thing that finds your private, quiet breaking point, the fear you've never told anyone, and then leans close in a voice of perfect courtesy to explain exactly how much further that break can go. He doesn't hate us. We are beneath hate. We are a curiosity, an experiment left running in a forgotten lab, and he is the scientist who occasionally glances at the glass, not to care for what's inside, but to note the fascinating ways it contorts itself when the temperature changes. Perhaps the most terrifying thought isn't that something is watching us from the dark. It's that something is watching from the dark and finding us, against all odds and reason, interesting.